Welcome, everyone, to The Shape of a Circle in the Mind of a Fish, Part 2. We have never been one. Oh, it might be. My name is Lucia, and I'm curator of life programs and general ecology at the Serpentine. And together, here is writer, editor, and just all-round encyclopedic genius, Filipa Ramos. Together, she and I have been curating this year-long symposium series and research project. We are actually calling it a long-durational symposium in 6 parts, of which today is the second part. And it's quite exciting and electrifying to see you all here. It sort of started, we started at the zoo in May May of this year even, and it's really beautiful to be standing here in Ambika P3. Nothing like this kind of space makes you think that like scale and size is sort of everything, but to say nothing of how exciting it is to have our heroes, the participants, here today. And I should say that the word for it is maybe terrifying as well. So today is presented in collaboration with the London Contemporary Music Festival and marks the first of what will be a phenomenal month of LCMF programming, the themes of which are incredibly connected to today's symposium. So when we started speaking, it didn't make sense not to collaborate, and we're incredibly grateful to LCMF for making that logical step into a concrete reality. We are also enormously grateful to the University of Westminster for letting us be here today. And we look forward to hopefully many, many collaborations with both LCMF and Ambika in the future. So just a couple of things. The year-long symposium takes place as part of a long-term project that we have at the Serpentine called General Ecology, which looks at investigating questions around environment, climate change, the Anthropocene, but also planetary scale complexities of other kinds that we can think of, and that can be thought of and perhaps therefore also changed, modified, somehow affected by thinking of them in ecological terms. And these enormous intricacies, these planetary scale complexities are kind of everywhere in, for example, the global entanglement of material extraction, technological production, and accelerated consumption, or the exchanges between the arts and the sciences, or as Hannah Landecker described it yesterday, the interconnection between the state of the biomass and the state of the economy. Or say other things that are more fleshy, like affect, love, loss, incredibly complex things. The General Ecology project, which will articulate itself across, around, and somewhat underneath many of the Serpentine Gallery's outputs, be they exhibitions, publications, live events, radio, is really also an experiment in working on ecology through ecological means and ecological worldviews and lenses. That is, through collaborative partnerships and a mycelium-like network of organizations and individuals that are working together. So if part 1 of the symposium, which responded to the exhibition of Ian Cheng at the Serpentine at the time, thought about language and cognition across human, non-human, animal, and artificial beings and species, and we were joking that sometimes you need interspecies communication to speak across disciplines, sometimes even across scientific disciplines, it became very clear to us that communicating, by the end of the day, it had become very clear to us that communicating sometimes doesn't need much more than just being with together, making together, playing together, weaving, eating, and dancing together. And this is what the General Ecology Project and its network tries to do, and will aim to do over the next years. A few other things drive us. Firstly, how to make the complex sensible. Over the last 2 days, Anna Thing spoke in various places in London both of the curiosity and passion of fieldwork of anthropologists and biologists, and of the devastating, patchy effects of what she calls feral proliferations, or the unintended and self-propagating effects of human-imposed infrastructure on landscape. How to make this fleshy, how to make this bodily, how to make it cognitively possible. What kind of interspecies cooperations, whether it be between artists, scientists, and social scientists, dreamers, poets, historians, can make this a little bit more possible. And if we borrow for a moment and completely take out of context Eve Sedgwick's dichotomy of paranoid versus reparative reading, can we think of a kind of reparative paranoia, like everything is connected? That's a kind of paranoia, but also reparative because it connects us more to each other, to the rights of nature, to notions such as love. Further, how to move beyond the centrality of the human scale. One of the questions that drove us for today's symposium was a speculative one. Can we think of the relationship between gut bacteria and planetary scale organisms without passing through the scale of the human, or at least sort of relativizing the scale of the human on that continuum? These pathways, these kind of tendencies that one has to go always through the same kind of scale or to revert back to the familiar, I think reminded me of chronic pain, when sometimes the neural pathway has been excited so much that the pain continues when the symptom is already gone. So how to think about alternative path makings, alternative connections, alternative wayfinding. Then, of course, given that we in the arts are in the business of dream weaving, how, to quote one of our advisors, actually, Catherine Vega, recently, can we dream something different? And forgive me for the small foray into sort of romantic, but let us imagine for a moment that the stories we tell ourselves as children, the science fiction we read, all the things that we know we are, these have been woven by hand by day, and then maybe settled into dream by night. And given that brains are incredibly plastic, particularly young brains, let's imagine that on a human scale these stories take root, that they make themselves into materials, pathways, flesh, and that we then grow up and we entangle with everything, with other materials, with people, what Daisy Hildyard calls the second body. We entangle with other species, with technology and water and earth and the planet. And in entangling, we retell those stories. We kind of world make, or we shape things in the shape that we somehow remember. So we world worlds in the shape of the stories we were told, which we believed to be the world in the first place. If we imagine that, what kinds of stories do we want to be telling ourselves about ourselves? Did science fiction predict the worlds we are enmeshed in? Or did those forms begin at bedtime, impressing very young, very plastic people that would end up ruling the world and deciding which shape technology takes? And since Lynn Margulis's pioneering work in biology, coevolution and cooperation are more the norm than the exception, then a new myth, the one that grows out of these new structures, new landscapes, is the one that we're thinking about. I was reminded when I was writing this of Vita Sackville-West's poem, where she wrote even, "Small pleasures must correct great tragedies, and therefore of gardens in the midst of war I boldly tell." Filipa.
Wow. It seems like the fish brought friends. Thank you all for being here. It's amazing to see that after all, what we've been obsessing and passionate about is we're not alone even in our passions. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the day today. So right now, here, every person in the room is carrying between 2 and 6 pounds, roughly 1 to 3 kilos of microorganisms. This calculation considers how each of us hosts about 100 trillion unicellular living forms: bacteria, archaea, fungi, protists, and viruses, who are pursuing with their activities and their lives within us. At the same time, our number of non-human cells equals at least the number of human cells. These multiple beings live in our skin, in our mammary glands, in our placenta, seminal fluid, uterus, vagina, lungs, mouth, eyes, stomach, and intestines, just to name a few popular places. Some perform commensal tasks, benefiting from us without doing us any harm. Others have developed a mutualistic relationship with us. They need us as much as we need them. There are also germs, pathogenic microorganisms that may harm us. But to a large extent, these living entities protect us against infections and help us maintain our health. This, from an anthropocentric perspective, if we upturn the viewpoint, it's easy to understand that why they would like and then why they want to ensure our long life, since to many of them, our death might also imply their end. And while the two of us are certainly not biologists, we thought of opening this day with an invitation to consider these units of biological diversity that share their lives with us, exactly because their existence challenges well-established concepts, such as those of difference, of self, of individuality, which throughout the consolidation of modernity came to define the humankind. These microorganisms invite us to think that we are not one, not even within ourselves, and that the notion of the self is a singular individual, is a fabrication. We could never have existed as singular creatures. Our bodies are traversed, occupied, inhabited by, and enmeshed with other bodies. The fact that we have never been alone puts also in evidence that we have never been detached from other species, that we are one among all other life forms, animal and non. And if roughly 150 years ago, when Charles Darwin, his Origin of Species, contributed to place humans closer to all other animals, the more recent discovery of the structure of the DNA by James Watson and Francis Crick, thanks to the X-ray images of Rosalind Franklin, who may risk to be the face of the new 50-pound banknote. And the more recent technology that made possible the study of microbial worlds within and beyond bodies changed the ways we conceive life, redefining it as an entangled existence largely operating by non-competitive means, but, as the amazing Lynn Margulis pointed out, by interlife domains, such as those of coordination and cooperation. Likewise, remarkable was the understanding that many processes of exchanges of genetic material, in particular in microbes, happen through endosymbiosis, horizontal and lateral transfers, rather than following classical vertical models. One of the questions, among many others, that guided the preparation for this symposium was that of trying to understand how the current exponential development in the knowledge and in biological fields may be changing the general perception and the general conceptions of life and of self, and how the change of paradigm from this competitive survival of the fittest model to a symbiotic entanglement may initiate new systems of worlding, systems that may take into account how life is a dense, knitted entity across plants, animal, fungi, and microorganisms, and that consider accurate hierarchies of beings. As biologist Margaret McFall sustains in a book co-edited by Anat Singh, who will be part of the symposium, microbes don't just rule the world. They make every life form possible, and they have been doing so since the beginning of evolutionary time. The partnerships and interconnections of life never appeared so important to acknowledge and to sustain with responsibility. Adopting interconnectivity as a methodology, we brought together experts from different fields, biologists and anthropologists, writers and neuroscientists, actors and artists, and invited them to experiment with formats to address and reflect about the relations between the one and the many. Learning from the microorganisms and their horizontal forms of transmission, we are here to interlace webs and lines across each other's. So let's the weaving begin.
I'm about to ruin this. No, I'm not.
They feel a bit like Beyonce.
So I literally have written in the notes of gratitude, Filipa, OMG, where to start. So I'm going to just say, Filipa, OMG, where to start?
It's bellissimo.
Inbrained, ensouled family. It's bellissimo. It's been fantastic to embark on this. We never want to stop working together. This is something, we can take this somewhere else, don't worry. All of our participants for being here, for saying yes, I mean, and for what they're about to share with us all. A team can be like a family, as it turns out. Holly Shuttleworth, Kostas Desinopoulos, Kostas, Holly, Kostas. Amazing. Everything that you see, every single piece of this puzzle has been made possible together. So, including the booklet and the production and all the care for everyone. So, you know, really that's important. Kamala Carey has led the production management together with Sam, who's somewhere here in the room, so thank you. Giles Round, if you have seen Fish No Fish signs, those were Giles Round, as is the booklet, for which we're incredibly grateful. There's a few individuals that have supported us for this specific event, Julia Mockenberg and Belmarsh Gallery. We're incredibly grateful to you and the Swiss Embassy as well. There are allies in the General Ecology Network who are so important to us, but too many to name here. You know who you are. Most of you are in this room, which is itself just a great honor. And all of the advisors that I'm sure would rather listen to our participants now than to me. So at this point, I just need to tell you three things. It says toilet through there. Internet, if it fails. So I had this idea of going, okay, so we're going to be so many people. We've set up an open Wi-Fi called We Have Never Been One. It is incredibly possible that just like on a train, that Wi-Fi can't hold all of our urgent messages out. If you have EduRoam, there's a way of logging into EduRoam down here, thanks to the University of Westminster, so do that. If you don't, what I suggest you do is something like, I mean, I'm excited about this, is you write down all your tweets, like hashtags and @s and all, and then you send them all later, so that all the people that receive it think that the symposium actually happened several hours after it ended. Yeah, it's not that cool, but I think it's the only way of finding a silver lining in what to do if the internet fails. But do comment, if you can, with the hashtag and the @ over there. And then finally, the cafe is food being run by an incredible organization called Mazimas. So do go and have a taste. And we're going to have a couple of breaks over the course of the day. And now, we're never over. You're never going to get rid of us. So it's a great pleasure to introduce now Phoebe Tickell, sorry to keep you waiting. With a background in biological and natural sciences, Phoebe Tickell is a renegade scientist who started her life as a genetic networks engineer at Cambridge and Imperial College in London and moved into human networks. She teaches at Schumacher College in Devon, and she is a member of the Inspiral Network, a global collective of DIY social entrepreneurs and freelancers that has been tempting people away from their regular jobs, and also a fundamental advisor to the General Ecology Project. Phoebe.